What if I told you a simple 50-cent coin could be worth thousands, even over $150,000? Welcome to the world of the USA Kennedy half dollar, where every coin tells a story, and some are worth a fortune. So grab your change jar, hit that subscribe button, and let's dive into the fascinating world of Kennedy half dollars, where history meets hidden treasure. Top 1. The quiet hum of post-war America. A nation found itself standing on the edge of change. The 60s were a turbulent yet transformative time. Civil rights marches echoed through the streets. The Vietnam War stirred debate and division. And yet, amidst the chaos, one figure emerged with the power to inspire unity: John F. Kennedy. Young, charismatic, and full of promise, he carried the hopes of a new generation. His presidency symbolized a fresh vision for America, a forward-looking dream of progress, peace, and global leadership. But on November 22, 1963, all of that came to a devastating halt. The shots that rang out in Dallas didn't just take a life, they shattered a nation's sense of security. The collective grief that followed was unlike anything America had ever seen. Crowds gathered in silence. Homes dimmed their lights. Schools held moments of silence. The pain was raw, national, and deeply personal. A country mourned not only its leader but the future he represented. In the days that followed, memorials began to take shape. Public parks, airports, foundations. But one tribute rose above the rest, not in size, but in symbolism. It would be carried by millions, passed hand to hand, silently reminding the bearer of a legacy lost too soon. That tribute was a coin. A half dollar, bearing the likeness of John Fitzgerald Kennedy. Within hours of the assassination, discussions were already underway at the U.S. Treasury. It was decided the image of Kennedy would replace Benjamin Franklin on the half dollar. It was not a move made lightly. Changing coinage in the United States involves more than design. It requires legal maneuvering and national consensus. But such was the reverence for Kennedy that the process was fast-tracked. Congress approved the change in record time. By early 1964, the new coin was in production. The design was striking. On the obverse, Kennedy faced left, his features calm and resolute. The sculptor, Gilroy Roberts, had based the design on a portrait he had completed for a presidential medal, a piece Kennedy himself had approved. On the reverse, Frank Gasparo's powerful heraldic eagle extended its wings, a reminder of national strength in a moment of loss. The 1964 Kennedy half dollar was composed of 90% silver and 10% copper. It was released in March of that year, and Americans were swept with emotion. People didn't spend the coin. They kept it, held it, collected it. It wasn't just currency, it was connection. A keepsake from a chapter that had ended too soon. But the story didn't end there. As the years passed, the half dollar remained in production, but its composition changed. Rising silver prices and public hoarding meant the mint had to adapt. In 1965, the U.S. government shifted to a clad composition, still silver, but less so. From 1965 to 1970, Kennedy half dollars were struck with a core of 79% copper and 21% silver, sandwiched between layers containing 80% silver and 20% copper. The result: a coin that contained 40% silver. This was no longer a coin of daily transaction. It was a coin with value beyond its face. Enter 1967. That year, America found itself at a crossroads. The summer of love was blooming on the West Coast. Protests intensified. The space race soared. And the Kennedy half dollar continued to roll off the presses, a quiet tribute amidst loud times. The 1967 Kennedy half dollar was minted in Philadelphia, though it bore no mint mark. That was part of a temporary policy enacted between 1965 and 1967, a decision by the U.S. Mint to combat coin hoarding by removing mint marks. People had begun saving coins based on rarity and origin. Removing the marks, the Mint hoped, would cool collector frenzy and return coins to circulation. But the plan had mixed results. Collectors still valued the 1967 Kennedy half dollar, not only for its design but for its silver content. Even at 40%, silver gave it weight, both literally and historically. It stood apart from the nickel-clad coins of later years. Each one struck was a little piece of the past, a continuation of a tribute that had begun with mourning and grown into legacy. More than 295 million Kennedy half dollars were minted in 1967. They were struck as both business strikes and special mint sets, replacements for proof sets, which weren't produced during those years. These SMS coins had a distinct satin finish, smoother than business strikes, shinier than circulation coins. To a trained eye, the difference was clear. And over time, they became highly collectible. But not all coins are created equal. While millions were minted, only a fraction remain in pristine condition. Fewer still are in top grades, those shimmering examples without blemish, with razor-sharp detail and untouched surfaces. These are the coins that catch the eye of collectors, appraisers, and investors. These are the coins that rise in value. And among them, a select few rise above all others. Sometimes it's a matter of condition. Other times, a rare variety. A double die. A striking error. A unique finish. Or perhaps, simply, a coin that survived the decades in extraordinary form, untouched by time or hand. One such 1967 Kennedy half dollar recently surfaced, and its condition stunned experts. It wasn't just good. It was perfect, flawless under magnification, with impeccable strike and luster. A true gem of American numismatics. And now, that coin, born from tragedy, molded in reverence, and preserved with care, has reached an astonishing value on the collector's market. Its price today, $152,800. Top 2. In the echoes of a decade marked by promise, progress, and pain, a new year dawned, 1972. America was still learning to breathe again after the heartbreak of the 60s. The country had witnessed moon landings and war protests, rock concerts and political scandals, but some things still held steady. Some symbols had not faded with the times. Among them was a shining coin that carried more than monetary value. It carried memory, emotion, and the unmistakable image of a man who had changed a nation in just 1,000 days. The Kennedy half dollar, now nearly a decade old, had evolved beyond its original intent. What began as a tribute born of tragedy had become a fixture in American currency. But unlike most coins, this one had a soul. Each year, as the mint released new issues, the half dollar carried with it a renewed echo of John F. Kennedy's legacy. And in 1972, as the country shifted under the weight of uncertainty, that coin continued to speak, silently, but powerfully. The world in 1972 was no longer the same one Kennedy had dreamed of leading. Richard Nixon was in office, embroiled in the early stages of what would soon become Watergate. The Vietnam War still lingered, and trust in leadership began to fray. Yet, in the pockets of Americans, the face of a president who had once inspired so much hope remained, minted in copper nickel, reflecting light under fluorescent bulbs in corner stores and cash registers. By 1971, the Kennedy half dollar had undergone a significant transformation. Gone was the silver that once added weight and luster. Rising silver prices and economic shifts had forced the U.S. Mint to adopt a copper nickel-clad composition, the same one used in dimes and quarters since 1965. While the coin no longer shimmered with precious metal, its design still carried an unmistakable presence. The 1972 Kennedy half dollar was minted at 3 locations: Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each coin bore its own story, marked by either a small D or S, or no mark at all for Philadelphia. It was the final year before the introduction of more refined minting techniques that would characterize later issues. Still, these coins were well struck, their designs bold and enduring. On the obverse, Kennedy's portrait remained strong, his hair windswept, his gaze determined. On the reverse, the eagle stood proud, grasping its shield and clutching both olive branch and arrows, a balance between peace and readiness for conflict. Though millions were minted, the public was not using them. The half dollar had begun to disappear from everyday life. Not because it was rare, but because it was special. Collectors saved them. Parents tucked them away in drawers. Grandparents gave them as gifts. And each year, new coins added to the growing tapestry of remembrance. Even in everyday business, when the coin did appear, it always stood out, a little larger, a little brighter, a little more significant than the rest. The 1972 issue saw more than 150 million coins struck between Philadelphia and Denver, while the San Francisco Mint produced proof coins in limited quantities for collectors. The proof versions were stunning, struck multiple times on specially polished dies, giving the coins a mirror-like finish and crisp detail that set them apart from circulation strikes. These proofs, nestled into their original mint packaging, would later become prized possessions, and then there were the anomalies. For every 100 million ordinary coins, there are a handful that defy expectation. Coins that escape the mint with doubled dies, misaligned strikes, off-center features, or unexpected errors that make them instantly more desirable. In the world of numismatics, it's often these rare missteps that become treasures. They are the accidents that no machine can reproduce, the unintentional masterpieces of minting. Some 1972 Kennedy half dollars feature minor varieties, such as subtle differences in the relief or die polish lines. But in the rarest instances, a coin appears in a condition so perfect, so unspoiled, that even the most seasoned collectors pause in admiration. These are the coins that rise to the top. Not for a quirk or error, but for their excellence. Imagine a coin struck with precision. No scratches. No blemishes. Luster that dances under light. Edges sharp as the day they left the press. A coin preserved through 5 decades as if time itself dared not touch it. These are the coins that auction houses whisper about. That private collectors seek in hushed tones. That disappear into vaults only to re-emerge years later with values that surprise even the experts. One such coin, a 1972 Kennedy half dollar, recently made headlines not because of a dramatic error or an exotic finish, but because of its immaculate condition. It was graded among the finest known to exist, flawless under magnification, untouched by circulation, wrapped in a legacy as polished as its surface. It had journeyed from the presses of a nation in transition to the hands of a collector who saw more than metal. It was history preserved, art perfected, and memory minted into permanence. And today, this single 1972 Kennedy half dollar, a survivor of time and testament to a legacy, holds a value far beyond its 50-cent denomination. Its current worth, $164,800. Top 3. The year was 1973. America stood in the thick of transformation, wrestling with its identity while standing on the cusp of modern history. The Vietnam War was slowly drawing to a complicated end, and trust in the government had begun to fray as whispers of scandal turned into a political storm. Watergate, which had begun as an odd footnote in a newspaper, now loomed over the Nixon presidency like a gathering storm cloud. But even as chaos brewed in Washington, and as questions about the nation's future loomed, certain symbols endured, quiet, steadfast, and deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. One such symbol was a coin. Not just any coin, but a piece of metal that carried more than value. It carried memory. It carried reverence. It carried the image of a man who had died a decade earlier but whose presence still hovered in the American spirit like a lighthouse in turbulent seas. The Kennedy half dollar, first minted in 1964 as an immediate tribute to a fallen president, had become something more than currency. It had become an icon. By 1973, the Kennedy half dollar had already lived through multiple changes. It had shed its silver composition after 1970, transformed into a clad coin made of copper and nickel. Though the precious metal was gone, the emotional weight remained. The design still bore the timeless portrait of President John F. Kennedy, sharp-jawed and forward-looking, a gaze fixed toward tomorrow. On the reverse, the fierce and noble American bald eagle, clutching arrows and olive branches, still reminded every holder of the delicate balance between peace and power. But there was something different about 1973. That year, the Kennedy half dollar was never released for general circulation. It was minted exclusively for collectors. That decision alone elevated the 1973 edition to a category all its own. The Philadelphia and Denver mints produced business strike coins, but they were only made available through official mint sets. If you didn't order a set directly from the U.S. Mint, you didn't get a 1973 Kennedy half-dollar. It never passed through the hands of a cashier. It never clinked into a vending machine. It lived instead in plastic cases, tucked away in velvet-lined boxes and collector folders, preserved like relics. San Francisco, as always, struck its proof coins with the polished beauty that defined the West Coast's craftsmanship. Those 1973's proofs had a mirror-like finish, each one a shining tribute to precision. The proofs were sought after, carefully stored, never intended for wear. They carried the same design, the same dimensions, but with a different soul, one born of perfection. In all, millions of 1973 Kennedy half-dollars were minted, but their limited access gave them a quiet mystique. For many collectors, that year marked a shift, the moment when the coin fully transitioned from a piece of everyday money into a collector's artifact. A token of history, yes, but also of value. Some saved them as patriotic symbols, others simply appreciated their aesthetics. But in the right hands, these coins became investments. Over time, as with all things minted, not every coin aged the same. Some developed marks. Others faded. But a precious few survived untouched. Preserved in their original brilliance, these coins stood apart from the rest. They became objects of pursuit for serious numismatists. Every fine detail was evaluated: fields, devices, luster, strike. A perfect example, untouched by time or error, could command attention across the world of coin collecting. Collectors would gather at shows and auctions, flipping through albums, inspecting under magnification, hoping to find the one. That one coin that shone just a bit brighter. That had escaped the soft brush of wear. That had avoided the tiniest nick or blemish. And in those rare moments when such a coin appeared, its value became more than monetary. It became legendary. In the world of the Kennedy half-dollar, condition is king. A perfect specimen from a limited year like 1973, where circulation was deliberately restricted, becomes not just collectible, but historically significant. The lack of general release, combined with decades of preservation in near-pristine form, created the ideal conditions for a masterpiece to emerge. And sometimes, amid the stacks of mint sets and proof cases, one such coin is discovered. A coin that defies time. That radiates as it did the day it was struck. That holds the face of Kennedy not as an echo of the past, but as a gleaming monument to what he represented. And that coin, hidden away for decades, shielded from the world, recently stepped into the spotlight. Today, that 1973 Kennedy half-dollar, nearly flawless and virtually untouched, is not just a collector's item. It is a treasure. Its value, confirmed by experts, envied by collectors, and whispered about in the halls of auctions and vaults, now stands at $154,900.